Okay, sorry about that. There was a glitch on my end, and hopefully everybody will make their way back in. I see people are rejoining, and we should be good to go. Let me see. Okay. Yeah, Ethan, if you want to find your way to the exam, people are coming back in.
Okay.
Sorry about that. I refreshed because your screen was not updating. So I refreshed, but I didn't know it would disconnect the whole thing. That would have never happened in Zoom. Zoom stays open, you know? So goodness, that was abrupt. My apologies. Okay, everyone make it back in. Almost everyone. They're getting in. Sorry about that, folks. All right, so it's recording again. All you, Ethan. Go right ahead.
Okay, let me see. Oh. Right. So I guess we'll just start going through the questions. So
yeah. Sorry, that one looks like the platform architect, not the integration architect document. At the top it says.
Thank you.
You're right. Yep. I had the link. Let me grab the link real quick. See if
there are okay, that's fine.
Yeah, there is some overlap, isn't there?
I see it there. Yep.
I mean, there are some overlap between the platform architect exam and the integration architect, but integration goes much deeper into the technologies that are used.
Yep. Okay. Let's share.
I'm researching platforms over here for exams. There you go.
I wonder. Okay, let's look at the first question. By the way, the practice exam, I believe the practice exam, the order of the questions is also not really randomized. So generally the questions will be following the topics that are in the overview. So explaining network basics. Sorry, platform architect, I'm wrong. Let me bring up the guide again. Practice, integration architect practice exam.
Oh yeah, the other one, do you want me to put that in the chat? The objectives?
No, I got it. So, okay. So initiating integration solutions on the Anypoint platform. So we can let's go through and look at these and see if we think that these are aligning with those objectives. They might not be. It might be doing something different.
Yeah, I think at the top it'll have like the objective and the questions, but I don't know. Yeah, I think they are categorized in the different sections. See section 1.
Yeah, because I do think I think this is based on the order. Usually the order in the LMS was the order. We tried to keep things by topic so we didn't make mistakes. So things tend to be kind of organized. So it's really easy with different people and different eyes to like mix things up. We wanted to make sure the objectives were getting in the right buckets and things.
Yeah.
We had a small staff, so we had to like kind of make sure we were always checking what we were doing. So an organization has used a center for enablement. Yeah, this sure sounds like overall MuleSoft strategy, right? So I think that this does fit into overall integration solutions with Anypoint platform. So an organization has used a center for enablement to help teach its various business groups best practices for building a large and mature application network. What is a key performance indicator to measure the success of the C4E in teaching the organization's various business groups how to build an application network? So I think the reason that this is on the practice exam is that performance indicators are kind of subjective a little bit. So I think we were finding out that we were getting people picking other answers who were doing really well on the exam. But let's see, the spirit is, you really want to know what is a C for E? How does it compare to the Center of Excellence in like more traditional, like SOAP-based initiatives? So what kind of makes MuleSoft unique in the way that it tries to organize it at a high level? Because as an architect, you're responsible for that overall vision.
And if you'd like to guess what the correct answer is, you can put it in the chat. And I laugh because they're all going to be A. But at any rate, at least, let's do this. Why do you think A, or we could do process of elimination, why is B not the right answer? Like do the reverse, something like that.
Yeah, we could do that. I could probably go through the logic of why we thought that these were good distractors.
Yeah. So our real big question here is, what is a key performance indicator to measure the success of the C4E? Okay, what is going to be determining that? So as we look at each of the answers, again, we want to drive what they're looking for. What are they looking for here? So if we look at B, the number of end user or consumer requests, would that tell us that? If our goal is to measure the success of the C4E. What is the success of the C4E? Business adoption. Yeah, good, Sandra. Business adoption. So would the number of end users or consumer requests per day tell us that? Or if not, why wouldn't it? It is kind of a business adoption. Ethan, take it from there. That's kind of what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, so I think we should go back and think about this in general. So I think the thing is not the specific KPI, because like I said, I think this question didn't do very well, but I think it's more about how do you measure the success of a C4E? So the C4E is supposed to be across the entire enterprise, right? How do you find out if people are adopting MuleSoft, and is it being used in the right way? So, I think Catalyst talks about this more, about outcome-based delivery, success plans, KPIs, as it makes sense, but the KPIs should be tied to those success objectives.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think that's more the thing to take home out of this, is that a better question would be to ask about what's the point of a C4E?
And that's a great thing to put there. What do you all think is the importance of the C4E? What are we looking for the C4E to manage in an organization, or I should say provide? Go ahead and put it in the chat or speak up.
It seems to me it's a way to enable lines of business to self-service the integration needs. And I've just been looking at the other options there. On B, for example, your adoption might be quite low, but the one API that got adopted has tremendous volume. Or your adoption may be great and you have super low volume, and that'll skew the real picture.
Yeah, that's a great point. Well, that's why this question is on the practice exam.
Yeah.
What are the goals? You're right. If you have a massive project that all hands on deck and it's going to really like transform the company, then really you care about that one project. You don't really care about the other lines of business. You don't necessarily care about the number of APIs that are published, because people can publish lots of APIs that are never used. So then you want to monitor the APIs and see if they're actually being utilized.
Mm-hmm. And like you say, not necessarily how well one in particular is doing, but what is the total number in this case across the different business groups? Is it really for the organization becoming more adopted?
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
I think we should not spend too much time on this.
Yeah. Do the one that requires twos too. Those are always fun.
Yeah. An internet company is building a new search engine that indexes sites on the internet and ranks them according to various signals. So just look at the way the questions are set up. There's always kind of like a contextual background. And then sometimes there'll be a middle paragraph, which is like specifically what we're honing in on, and then the question. So sometimes you might want to read the question first and then read the contextual. Or
that's my method. That's what I usually do, because then I know specifically what they're looking for. I target that. Mm-hmm.
So they're saying, what two traditional architectural requirements should the integration architect ensure are in place to support this new search engine? So like integration requirements. And the requirements have to do with, there's a new search engine that indexes sites and then ranks them according to various signals. The management team wants various features added to the site. There's a team of software developers eager to start on the functional requirements received from the management team. Okay, so they've got these they want to add these new requirements as they're going. So what two architectural requirements should the integration architect ensure are in place to support the new search engine?
To me, it seems that we're trying to delineate between functional requirements and architectural requirements, right?
Business requirements, yeah. So these are like functional requirements are, sorry, I was thinking non-functional requirements. These are functional requirements, which are business related.
So it says which two traditional architectural requirements. So we don't care about the functional so much, is how I read that. Architectural requirements, the architecture should be, I would say, A and B, because the rest are functional requirements.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think that statement, there is a team of software developers eager to start on the functional requirements. That means that they're wanting to get started, but yet like you say, which two traditional architectural requirements should you consider to get in place to support that? So you're talking about, like you say, the architectural requirements, the underlying, as opposed to the functional requirements, right?
So A is kind of obvious. You don't want to impact the current users.
So less about the answers and more about the approach. Am I thinking about this the correct way? Am I interpreting the way they're asking this correctly?
Ethan, what do you think? Like really validating what the question is asking.
I think they're talking about, well, so the functional requirements could be anything, right? So you really have no idea what these business requirements are going to be. People are going to ask for anything. So before you start going down that road, because they're saying like relevant search results are returned for a query. Well, they didn't tell you what those functional requirements are. That may have nothing to do with that. So C, D, and E are all, you're assuming what those new functional requirements are. Search results are returned in the language chosen by the user. Those are all going to be specific to a story or a use case. But you can't account for all possible stories. I think they're saying the first thing that you should do when you first get to the organization is just look at their infrastructure and what the systems are that they have, and just make sure that as you start to investigate new things, you're not impacting the day-to-day business. So I would agree that A for sure has to be there. And as far as new features can be added to the system with ease, that means like trying to figure out the easiest way to add things without it. A and B are both talking about not impacting existing business.
Mm-hmm.
And those are traditional, I would say those are traditional architecture requirements.
Yeah.
Forget about MuleSoft. Anytime anybody's going to do something new in a production environment, those have to be in place. You don't just let the developers do whatever they want. You don't give them direct access to the database.
So to really answer your question, Hardy, is your approach correct? I would say yes. Wouldn't you, Ethan? So because Hardy, you picked up initially traditional architectural requirements. That kind of resonated with you. So I think your approach was accurate.
Yeah, because it feels like, and I've seen this in the Google Cloud Architect exam as well. They'll throw a ton of stuff at you to kind of muddy the waters.
Yeah.
And that's one of the things an architect should be able to do is identify what's important, discard what you don't need, and answer the question they're asking, because it's very easy to answer something that they're not really asking.
True. So half of it is interpreting the question, right?
Yeah, although in this case, if you look at this question, I don't think it's trying to muddy the waters. It's saying there's a bunch of developers that want to get started right now. There's a lot of pressure. And as an architect, you're saying, we have to make sure that you're not going to break anything.
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't think they're specifically trying to muddy the water. They're just offering a bunch of information that's less relevant.
I don't know what's less relevant about it. I mean, they're trying to make it's a scenario-based question. They're saying, like, as an architect, your responsibility as an architect is to not just give the keys to the kingdom. I think this is actually a really good question. Your role as the MuleSoft architect, or as an architect, is to think about kind of the whole holistic system and not just the shiny new thing.
Gotcha.
Yeah. Okay, that's good. So if we think about it, that's kind of just a general, like, do you have architecture experience that they're testing for? What are they testing for on the exam? They want to see that you have an architect mindset, not a developer mindset. You don't just hack away. You're taking into account all of the opposing forces that are pressuring on the entire organization. And by the way, this is more at the C4E kind of level. Like, if you're a C4E person, that's kind of your job, is to balance all those competing requirements. All right, let's see what this one has to say. An API is being implemented. Okay, so now we're down into probably the next. Let's go back and look at this. We've probably shifted to, well, let's see.
Yeah, you may have jumped to a different section. I think there's just a few per section.
Right. Designing for the runtime plane technology architecture. Although, I don't know, they're saying API, so we could still be talking about overall building a application network. So let's see if we think that this is still high level, or is it getting more granular. An API is being implemented using the components of an endpoint platform. The API implementation must be managed and governed by applying API policies on any endpoint platform. So if we go back to the objectives, let's see where this might fit into multiple areas, right? So actually, if you look at how the exam is broken into, the first part tends to be more the business requirements, implementing business requirements. This is all the different integration paradigms, scatter gather, synchronous, async, right? How you actually develop a Mule app, API kit, and then a little bit on MUnit testing. And then it shifts to non-functional requirements. So half the exam is on non-functional requirements that apply to every Mule application you build. So here we're still at the business requirement stage. Where it fits in exactly is probably it's either overall or it's going to be in using integration paradigms. So what must be done before the API implementation can be governed on any endpoint platform? So this is testing probably at an overall level. Do you understand what governance is? So you're writing the implementation. You're in Studio. You're building it out. They didn't really tell us if the API was in API Manager at all in the first place, but we want to use governance. So how do you govern an API? So we know A is probably the right answer. You have to publish it to Exchange, get the app ID. We just did this yesterday, right, Diane?
Yep.
Get the API instance ID. Must be obtained from API Manager to be used in the API implementation. Oh, is that even right? That's why maybe that's why it's on the practice exam. Oh, the instance ID. The API must be published to Exchange.
This is, yeah.
But the API instance ID, I don't think the developer has access to API Manager, do they?
No, it depends. Generally, they do.
So the API instance ID doesn't also appear in Exchange? Maybe it does. No,
I think it only appears in API Manager.
Correct. Yeah.
So I guess there is like a public part of it where people can go in and get the API instance ID. Yeah.
An API can learn. You know what? It's interesting because answer A makes it sound like it's a basic endpoint. And they're talking about govern, what must be done before an API implementation. Remember, I was emphasizing the difference between an interface and an implementation. So meaning the web service, when can it be governed by any point platform?
Because we could put a proxy in front of it, and then you don't have to do anything on the implementation. that's the other thing.
Right. Exactly.
But that's not going to be one of the answers. But the problem is they said what must be done. So
right.
Another reason why this is maybe on the practice exam is that someone said, oh, there's actually 2 ways to do it. So.
True. And Madonna, you're right. If we do basic endpoint, that would be auto discovery. Yes. So really the question should be more explicit in saying that it would, be an embedded or basic endpoint, what must be done. And then A would be clearly the answer. Right. Yeah.
So anyways, but A would work in some of the cases. So that's another thing on the exam. You have to think like maybe they haven't thought through all the edge cases yet. But here they're saying a RAML definition of the API must be created in API Designer so the API can then be published to Anypoint Exchange. So that's actually not true, right? You don't need to create the RAML file in it. You can govern other APIs. They don't have to be built in API Manager or to API Designer.
It comes down to what must be done.
It's also interesting here that they're saying just API. They didn't say if it's a RAML or they just said it's a REST API. They didn't say what the spec was.
Yeah.
Governance has nothing to do with the spec. It has to do with it does a little bit.
Well, and that, this is another thing that I would say would throw us off because we are teaching governance also. And governance of your APIs, and governed is written 2 times in this question. Governed by applying API policy. So now they're saying, okay, that's really securing it with API policies from API Manager. But governance is also an element that I think this was written before governance was really out, because governance actually tests against your specification with a rule set.
Oh, right. This was right. This isn't actually talking about, because they don't talk about using the governance feature in here.
Right.
They're talking about underneath what governance is doing is it's automating rules so you don't have to manually create all these policies.
Yeah.
Especially custom policies. Okay, so
this question, if I were to approach it, I would rewrite it to begin with. But I think that that may be why it is in the practice exam But anyway, go ahead and continue on. I know you're going down the why these other answers are.
So they're saying, and this C is saying it has to be OAS. Actually, as soon as you see RAML and OAS, I would not consider B and C because you can have both. So that can't be the answer. The API must be published to the organization's public portal. So instead of using Exchange, they're saying use your own portal. So potential developers and API consumers, both inside and outside the organization, can interact with the API. D is actually kind of interesting because technically you probably could have your own API policies that are going to the endpoint of the application. So then let's go back to, well, what's the recommended best practice in general? So the recommended best practice is to use API Manager because it's just there in the platform rather than going outside of the platform. So because A seems like a good answer, D could also be potential. As a MuleSoft architect, you would still recommend A. That's what I would say.
Yep.
So D is a tricky distractor because it's not completely wrong. It's just a lot of extra work and expense, and it's getting stuff outside of the platform. And the reason you're buying Anypoint Platform is to have it all managed holistically. All right. Should we move on?
Yep.
So again, I think you want to take out of this, like if the question looks a little tricky and weird, take out of it, what is it really trying to test? Maybe it's not testing the right thing, but what's the exam objective? And it's trying to see, do you understand how all the pieces fit together with APIs? So there's this whole thing of like we were very careful about the definitions. When you say API, people misuse the word API all the time. When they talk about an API, there's the API interface, which is RAML or OAS or something like that. And then there's the API implementation where you're building it to respond to requests. Then there's also the API client, which is making the requests. And I think there's another term that they use besides client, which is like a client, but
Consumer.
There's an API proxy, right? So then the client is sometimes going to the proxy, then the proxy is going to the implementation, and all three of those are using the same API interface definition. So yesterday was really good when we talked about the client ID and client secret. We needed to add these headers in, but we didn't want to change the interface. The implementation. Instead of having to go in and recode the implementation, in the proxy, we could just go and define a policy, which is then going to actually inject changes into the implementation. So that's that whole diagram of the back and forth and messaging and things. That's what you really need to understand really deeply. And then how that ties into going up into API Manager, Runtime Manager. Right? The implementation is getting deployed to Runtime Manager, but API Manager is being used to hold all the policies and the interfaces. So you just really need to be really clear on that whole communication across the network and the order of things. And then you add governance in there. That's a third thing that's up there. That's managing things, that's interacting with API Manager.
Mm-hmm.
All right, moving on. Additional nodes are being added to an existing customer-hosted Mule runtime cluster. Okay, so when they say cluster, we're thinking this question was written a while ago, so it's going to be on-prem. Nowadays, you can get some clustering also up in Cloud Hub, but the behavior is going to be similar. So they're all within the same environment. So I've got a cluster of Mule runtimes to improve performance. Mule applications deployed to this cluster are invoked by API clients through a load balancer. Okay, first of all, if we go back to what we think this question is asking about, this sure seems like it's performance related, performance and reliability, maybe some persistence. So this is anytime they're asking about a cluster, that's going to be non-functional requirements. So it looks to me like they did shuffle the items on this practice exam to help you. get the experience a little more. Okay, so we're adding new nodes to an existing cluster. Mule applications deployed to this cluster are invoked by API clients through a load balancer. So when they say invoke, they mean after the application is up and running, yeah, clients are coming in and they're going through a load balancer, that they control the load balancer. What is also required to carry out this change? So you're assuming when you you add it to the load, that the load balancer is being notified of these new nodes. So the load balancer should know about these new nodes. So they're saying, oh, I don't know what D is. D got cut off.
Oh, wow.
Maybe it return. Oh, no, I don't know.
Yeah. Wow.
External monitoring tools or log aggregators must be configured to recognize the new nodes.
Wow, that makes perfect sense.
That's obviously true because API cluster. So the load balancer also had to be updated, right? Like MuleSoft, the MuleSoft runtime cluster doesn't know about any of these things. So A would be definitely a good answer. This is saying a new load balancer entry must be configured to allow traffic to the new nodes. Oh, this is interesting. You would think that was true, like I was saying. But this is interesting. Let's think about how the cluster works. The clustering is usually used for the back-end processing, right? Among you're sharing the load between an object store or VMQ, and one of the nodes is the primary. So usually all the traffic has to go to the primary, and then it all gets distributed across the other nodes. And so in that sense, the cluster would still function if you didn't do that. The load balancer is for inbound requests to be handled by different nodes. And that has actually nothing to do with who's the primary node. Right? A load balancer can send inbound HTTP requests to any node in the cluster, and then there's still going to be the one primary cluster, primary node, which is going to handle, like if you have a persistent object store, the persistence would be in that one. There's different ways you can configure it. So it's not an absolute requirement. Although you might want to obviously use those new nodes. It depends on what they're doing. We don't know that the things in the cluster should all be accepting inbound traffic. New firewall rules must be configured to accommodate communication between API clients and the new nodes. So again, not a requirement. You could have all the inbound traffic going to just a few of the HTTP listeners and not the other ones. And then anyway, and we don't know what D is, but A definitely seems like a good answer, right? So we agree that A is the right answer. And then, but what's the point of this? They're getting you thinking about how the cluster works. So all that detailed stuff that you did with the hands-on exercises, that's what you need to know. Okay, next question. Oh, and how much time do we have? Are we up?
We have about 15 more minutes.
Okay.
We've got 4 hours, Ethan. We've got 4 hours. No,
of course we do.
But what we will do is we can, as we're looking over these questions.
Let me do this. Let me start going through this, and let me just I'll just riff on any things that you should be aware of, right? Kind of based more on like what the question's asking rather than the answers and everything. So. Okay.
Yeah. Like interpret the question. You think that would be helpful? Yeah.
So sorry.
Go ahead.
Mule application is deployed to runtime fabric. So runtime fabric is tricky, right? It's using Kubernetes and all that stuff. It's usually, sometimes they're used so that we can lock it off from the outside world, and must access the data saved in the object store v2 by a Cloud Hub application. What do you need to do? Right, so that's got to be a secure thing because RTF is locked down. So then this is going to be the details about that. So again, just you have to know about security and how you get to outside systems in RTF. Oh, okay. This is still considered like an overall. They do have this broken up into sections, so these are still considered. That's funny. This is considered an overall initiating integration solutions on the endpoint platform. I would argue that that question doesn't really. Adding new nodes to a cluster, that's not initiating integration solutions. That's working with that's designing the whole architecture. So I think that question wasn't in the right section. Designing for runtime plane technology architecture. Mule application is deployed to a cluster of 2 customer-hosted Mule runtimes. So we did a lot of hands-on with that. There's Alex is the primary and Lee is the secondary. It has a flow that pulls a directory on a file system for new files. So you're supposed to know about the primary and non-primary and how many times is the file system being pulled when you have the same application deployed to both nodes. And we know that it's just the primary node that's going to do that. But now the primary node fails for an hour and is restarted. So they're really getting in here about these edge cases about when the node fails and starts back up, the second node, Lee, becomes the primary, right? And Lee's not going to stop being primary just because Alex comes back online. So that's what the answer is going to be. So the point here is really knowing hands-on, step-by-step. When the node goes down, what's the behavior? When the node comes back up, what's the behavior? And how do you get it pushed back over to the primary if you wanted to? How do you move things over? So you can test all that hands-on. You just go through those scenarios a lot and be curious about what do you get duplicate behavior ever? How can you avoid duplicate behavior? Do you can't access something because the node went down? You want to look at all of those edge cases.
And we did that. We created the 2 servers, remember, clustered them. We actually did that.
Right.
Yeah.
Mule runtime manager as the app URL. I don't know what that means. Someone did not QA the stock very well. Requests are sent by, so runtime manager, I don't know what that means. Requests are sent by external web clients over the public internet to the Mule application's app URL.
Could that have been a typo? Runtime manager has the app URL. Requests are sent by external web
clients over the public internet to, let's say they're being sent to a Mule application's app URL.
Yeah. Each
of these requests is routed to the HTTPS listener. Okay, so we're talking about how stuff goes through the load balancer, right, to get routed. Through the HTTPS listener to the running, on the running. So just a Mule application has an HTTPS listener. Later, the DevOps team edits some properties of this runtime Mule application in Runtime Manager. Okay, so they've changed some properties. Immediately after the new property values are applied in Runtime Manager, how is the current Mule application deployment affected? And how will future web clients requests to the Mule application be handled? This is a confusing question. I have to read in a lot of what they're trying to say. So what happens when you change a property in a Mule application? Using zero downtime, the application is going to get redeployed, right?
Mm-hmm.
But if you only change the property, does it need to, does it automatically redeploy or?
Yeah,
the,
because you've reconfigured the application. And so
Yeah.
it's going to automatically redeploy. So that's what it says here. Cloud Hub will redeploy the Mule application. New web client requests are routed to the old Cloud Hub worker until the new one is available. They're basically saying it's zero downtime, right? You're supposed to know that there's zero downtime.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Cloud Hub 1 will redeploy the Mule application to a new worker. What you need to know now is how is it in Cloud Hub 2? And it's similar. They're not called workers. They're called replicas, but it's the same overall behavior. And then these will be wrong because, well, new web clients will return an error. So that'd be terrible. That would not be zero downtime if you had to wait for the new application to come up. And this one here is going to say new web client requests are routed to the old Cloud Hub worker both before and after. So that would be somehow you've got to manually update the load balancer to reroute things. And that would be a terrible design. So this is really getting into, you understand the overall architecture of how the URL that you request, when they say, myapp.cloudhub.com, that's not the endpoint that's running the application. That's the load balancer that's receiving the request. And then it splits it off. And that's the beauty of it, is that an application can do it and a new one can come up, but the outside world doesn't know that there was any change. Your external URLs remain stable. And that's just what they're testing here. That's like kind of fundamental architecture.
Okay, let me ask this question. Bonus points. Bonus points. What configuration in Cloud Hub 2.0 supports zero downtime? It's a selection. You have a choice of 2. What configuration supports zero downtime in your deployment configuration? Did I stump you? Oh my gosh. One supports zero downtime. The other one stops the original app and restarts, or
Right.
I should say spins up the new one. Do you know that it is a deployment strategy, but it's something we choose?
Right. And is it the default or the non-default? That's another input. They always ask questions about default. They love asking questions about what's the default way things happen.
I think it is the default.
I would think that the default would be zero downtime, because that's what people expect.
But what is it called? There you go. There you go. Genevieve got it. Genevieve got it. Rolling update. Rolling update supports zero downtime.
Right.
They recreate, stops the original app totally and spins up the new one. And so there is no zero downtime. Okay. So
right. But in your logging, you have a very clean change between when it starts and
if it wasn't something that was actively accepting requests, then do the recreate. And then you don't have to have the overlapping resources available if you're on a vCore model.
Right.
Right. Yeah.
That's also, so it's a little technicality. So it's kind of like in general, for most people, it's not as big a deal. Most people are just going to do the rolling updates. But if you're trying to really tune things, it'd also be a little faster to restart.
I pondered why they think it's faster. That's just something that I pondered. And I think it's because that it doesn't totally green up. Like if we're doing a rolling update, okay, so the original app is running, we spin up the new one.
Oh, no. Yeah, I know why. They don't have to tear down the existing VM.
Right. Yes.
It's
so
it's way faster to redeploy to a Mule.
Although your new app is getting the requests just as fast, but that whole transition completes longer.
Oh, it used to take 10 minutes for the VMs to start.
Oh no, it's not fast.
What they do now is they have standby VMs that they always have a couple extra VMs that they deploy to. Yeah.
Crazy. That's cool. So watch the terminology on that. And I do think that the default is the rolling update. Like, you don't have to change anything on that. So it'll default it And at any rate, yeah.
Right. Here, the company has several applications deployed to Cloud Hub VPC. Okay, and remember in Cloud Hub 2, this all changed, and so the new exam is going to be to Cloud Hub 2. So don't obsess too much about this. We really have to go through the material that you had in class and understand how this all works in Cloud Hub 2. Also, actually, I don't know if you need to be ready for Cloud Hub 1 questions too, because half the customers are still on Cloud Hub 1.
Yeah.
So as an architect, you need to support both.
I was going to ask, is the new exam based on Cloud Hub 2 as well?
Yeah.
Yes.
You're
Okay. And right now it's the, okay, sounds good.
Yeah, you'll have both probably. Probably less Cloud Hub 1, but I think it's still going to be represented.
It's not a huge part of the exam either. There's not that many questions on Cloud Hub 2.
Flex Gateway.
Yeah.
Want to answer the question? Is Flex Gateway on it?
I don't know. I don't remember. They didn't tell you it is, but you probably have to. It's still part of the architecture. I think it would be fair to write a question on it, so you can assume it could be on there. So they're talking about using a custom connector that's available on the public internet, and the solution will use a custom connector that requires Microsoft Windows Server 2022. Which deployment model minimizes disruption to existing integrations while meeting the new requirements? So they have a little diagram to help you see what they're doing. The API application has to connect in to the backend application that has a custom connector running. Custom domain. Oh, they mean, oh, this is our favorite little thing. We're using domains.
Hey.
Right. So let's not spend too much time on it, but
yeah,
this is all the stuff about, do you need a dedicated load balancer into Cloud Hub? And then you need to tunnel into the corporate network. So it's got to be a VPC in order to get outside of Cloud Hub into the custom network, right? It can't be in the shared load balancer. It's going to have to be a dedicated load balancer in order to use the VPC. Actually, let me be careful about that. You don't need a dedicated load balancer to use a VPC. That's not always true.
That is, yeah.
So I would say, since we don't have that much time, the overall is just get really detailed, comfortable with all these terms and what they actually do, and the diagrams. What is actually happening in the communication? What are you configuring? Where do you store the certificates? What kind of certificates get stored? Actually, if you can get your hands on it, actually do it. I think if you actually do the admin stuff like they do in the customer hosted runtime class, actually get hands-on with it. That's going to really help you. There's this question about, they love asking this question about the how many IP addresses you need to support what you want, the CIDR group. This doesn't apply in Cloud Hub 2 anymore. You don't have to configure these CIDR groups, I don't think, right, Diane?
You have to give the range when you're creating a private space. But because of the way Kubernetes manages the IP addresses, it's not as critical. And they actually recommend a CIDR block of, Genevieve, do you know what the recommended CIDR block is? Isn't it 22 or something like that? I'll look.
So I'll tell you that I can back up from this. this question always bothered me because it turns out that there's no expense to you to make the CIDR block as big as possible. And by having a smaller, the impact of having a smaller CIDR block is that if you ever go over it, you've got to restart the entire VPC. You have to restart every application in that VPC if you want to change the configuration of it. So what most of the MuleSoft architects I know did is they used the maximum CIDR block. So because even if they said today we're only going to have 500, we only need 500 IPs, you never want to go and take down the entire production VPC to update it. So for planning purposes, most people actually recommend using the maximum CIDR block size because it doesn't cost you anything.
And once you have set up your environment and you need more, now it won't happen, like you say, as much in Cloud Hub 2, but if you need more, in other words, you can't expand your VPC or private space. You've got to recreate it all over.
Yeah, you have to restart the whole thing, and every application has to be redeployed. So the downside of using a huge CIDR block is like for security purposes, if you're scanning for malicious IPs coming in, now you have to scan across a wider range of IPs. You can't lock down the IP addresses as much. So it's slightly maybe more, it's a bigger service vector for people to attack. But that's probably a smaller downside than having to restart your whole production network.
Yeah, really.
So that's the take home of all these questions about CIDR blocks is what's the point is you're trying to avoid having to read the network. Okay, it looks like we're kind of at time. So
yes, we are. And we can dissect more questions like this as you're going back through the practice exam. If there are certain ones you really want us to hone in on, let us know. And
yeah, sorry, let me just interrupt. So yeah, Janavi, that best practice 10 times the number, that came from engineering. And that was also the same thing they said for Cloud Hub 1. And it's just not true because you don't know how fast things are going to grow in an organization. 10x is just, what if it's 20x? You know, if the organization is doing really well, they might expand very rapidly. So there's no downside to having additional IPs available in the CIDR block. It doesn't cost you anything. So generally, you should do the maximum.
All right, I got something awesome to show you all. Let me show you what I've been working on over here. As long as I don't shut the meeting down, right? Goodness. Do not refresh your screen if you are hosting a meeting in Kajabi. Lesson learned. So let me share what I've been doing over here. All right. So using intelligent document processing, I put in the exam in PDF, and I asked the question to assume the role of recreating an exam, locate each question on the document, and the first pass, here's what I got. Woo! So it is pulling the question instead of having to retype all of that. Yay. I have the answers. Now what I can do is levy this into a, not that one, here it is. I was about to put this into there was one called Quest Base, and we're Integration Quest. So it just made sense to try this one out. Like, I like the name. And so I'll work with this. The only thing is I don't know if it, under the question, yeah, you can add an image. Okay, that was one thing I needed to know. So I'm working on it.
That's
and
so cool, Jay. Well, while we were just talking, you just did that.
So in intelligent document processing, for those of you that haven't worked with this at all yet, it's scanning the document. So that is your practice exam. And I asked it to populate it with the question and the answer, with the keys, with the answers. So I asked for all of this here. And now I will take and populate it over there. I might even fix some of the questions if I don't like the way the questions are. So Ethan, we could groom over this and look it over. you know?
Yeah.
Okay. And then we'll share it. You all can try this out once we get the exam fixed the way it should. And I think that this platform will retain answers because, you know, sometimes we never really know if our answer was right, and you have to keep going back through it and through it. So I'll know more about this platform when we experiment with it some more. Okay. So I hope this was valuable for you all. Those of you that are watching this recording later, more to come on this. We're going to continue to do the office hours as well. If you would like anyone in this meeting now, I will go ahead and send you the links to the YouTube videos. Those will be up this weekend for the office hours we previously done. And if you are interested in joining those, just let me know. And then we'll get this practice exam cooking too, so we can have one that's a little more like an exam type of thing with the random answers. Yeah, great. Glad you all enjoyed it. Yes. Awesome. And let us know what you would like to see to follow up on our slide deck here. Let me hit this really quick. 1 second. We will complete this out to let you, as a reminder, hang on a minute. There it is. As a reminder, TDX is coming up in March. Hope to see you all there. And that will conclude our actual study group today. And so let me make sure I'm stopping the right thing now. So thank you all for coming today, and look forward to seeing you all next week. Those of you that are in the office hours, see you on Tuesday, and I'll send those invites out. And Ethan, as always, thank you. Great to have you with us, and more fun ahead.
Yep.
Awesome. Great. Thank you, everybody.
Bye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.